Your mind is the only thing you have total authority over, yet it often feels like the least stable part of your life. We spend immense energy trying to control the world around us, hoping that will finally bring us peace, only to find our inner world remains anxious and reactive. The ancient Stoics offered a different, far more reliable promise, a state of unshakable tranquility they called a tranquil mind. This video will give you the single, daily practice that builds this profound inner stability for yourself, not as a theory, but as a lived reality. We will uncover how a simple evening ritual used by Roman emperors can rewire your reactions, and why mastering your internal judgments is the true source of power. What does a truly stable mind look like to you? That promise of not about feeling nothing. It is not about numbing yourself to the world's joys and sorrows. The Stoics were not aiming for the blank stillness of a statue. Their goal was something far more alive and far more powerful. They called it inner stability, a state of being that remains unbroken even when the ground beneath you shakes. So what exactly did they mean by that? Let us break it down into two ancient ideas that sound complex but are beautifully simple in practice. First, there is apatheia. This word is often misunderstood. It is not apathy. It is the opposite of being controlled by destructive passions. Think of a passion not as a strong feeling, but as a storm that hijacks your judgment. It is the surge of rage that makes you say things you regret. It is the tidal wave of anxiety that paralyzes you from taking any action. It is the clinging grasp of envy that turns another person's success into your own personal misery. Apatheia is freedom from those hijackings. It is the space between something happening and your reaction to it. In that space, you find your stability. You feel the emotion, you acknowledge it, but it does not steer the ship. Your reason does. The second idea is eudaimonia. This is often translated as happiness or flourishing, but it is a very specific kind. It is not the fleeting happiness of a good meal or a promotion. Eudaimonia is the deep, enduring satisfaction that comes from living in alignment with your highest character. The Stoics believed that true flourishing could only be rooted in virtue, in qualities like wisdom, courage, justice, and self-discipline. Your inner stability, then, is not dependent on your bank account, your social status, or whether people treat you well. It is built on the unshakable foundation of knowing you acted with integrity today. You faced a difficulty with courage. You treated someone with fairness even when it was inconvenient. That knowledge is a source of strength no external event can take from you. This makes one thing crystal clear. Inner stability is not a mood you hope to catch. It is not a passive state of calm that the universe occasionally bestows upon you when everything goes right. It is a skill, and like any skill, from playing the piano to speaking a new language, it is built through disciplined, daily practice. You would not expect to sit down at a keyboard once and play a symphony. You cannot read a single book on Stoicism and suddenly possess an unshakable mind. The stability comes from the repetition, from the conscious effort, from showing up for the practice even, and especially when you do not feel like it. The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius did not write his private reflections in a time of peace and luxury. He wrote them by candlelight in military camps, surrounded by the stresses of war and governance. His stability was forged in the doing. That is the core Stoic promise, not a life without challenge, but a self that does not come undone because of it. We are surrounded by a world designed to hijack that space between event and reaction. The modern instability trap is not a dramatic, single event. It is a quiet, daily erosion. It begins the moment you wake up and reach for your phone. A flood of notifications, headlines crafted for outrage, and curated glimpses into lives that seem more successful than your own all land in your mind before you have even had your first thought. Each ping is a tiny external event, and without a practiced discipline, it dictates your internal state. A frustrating email from a colleague ruins your morning. A political news cycle you cannot control fuels an undercurrent of anxiety for days. Seeing an old friend's vacation photos sparks a subtle but real sense of lack in your own life. This is the reactive cycle. Something happens out there, and like a puppet on a string, your emotions jerk in response. You are not living your life, you are conducting a constant, exhausting review of the world's performance and giving it a 5-star rating for stress. The feeling this creates is a deep, chronic powerlessness. Your peace becomes conditional. If only my boss was more reasonable, I could be calm. If only the news was better, I could be hopeful. If only I had what they have, I could be happy. You have handed the keys to your inner world over to a universe that is famously indifferent. The Stoics saw this trap with stunning clarity 2,000 years ago. They called the solution the inner citadel. Imagine your mind not as an open field, battered by every wind and storm, but as a fortified city. The walls of this city are your principles, your practiced judgments. The chaos of the outside world, the insults, the setbacks, the endless noise, it all happens outside the gates. It can rage and shout, but it cannot get in unless you personally open the gate and invite it. Your tranquility, your stability, lives safely inside, undisturbed. The reactive cycle keeps you running to the gate, flinging it open for every passing disturbance. The practice of Stoic self-examination is what builds the walls and, more importantly, trains the gatekeeper. That gatekeeper is your attention, and it is time to give it the training manual it has been missing. The gatekeeper needs a training manual, a set of daily drills. The Stoics had a name for this foundational practice, a word that sounds foreign but describes something you already feel the need for. They called it prosochē, meaning attention, a vigilant, moment-to-moment awareness of your own judgments. This is not the scattered attention we give to our screens. It is a focused, gentle watching of your own mind, and to strengthen that attention they prescribed meletē, a form of meditation or training. Think of it as mental rehearsal. You do not wait for the crisis to figure out how to remain calm. You practice the principles in the quiet of your own mind, so when the storm arrives, your response is not a desperate scramble, but a remembered strength. Daily self-examination is the practical fusion of these two ideas. It is where your vigilant attention turns inward and your training becomes real. This was not some obscure philosophical suggestion. It was the core operating system for history's most noted Stoics. The wealthy senator Seneca ended each day by sitting with himself and asking, "What bad habit did I cure today? How am I better, more difficult? How did I avoid this or that?" The emperor Marcus Aurelius, ruling one of the largest empires on earth, would retreat to his private thoughts and write, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." The former slave Epictetus, whose teachings were recorded by his student, constantly directed his followers to examine their impressions. Is this within my control or not? This was not theoretical. For them, it was as essential and non-negotiable as physical hygiene. They treated the cultivation of their inner world with the same seriousness a soldier treats maintaining his weapon. They were not perfect beings but practitioners, and through this nightly audit, they built the resilience that allowed Seneca to face exile, Marcus to lead through plague and war, and Epictetus to teach with unassailable freedom despite his physical limitations. This practice is their legacy, not in dusty scrolls, but as a living technology for stability. It is a tool forged in the fires of real human difficulty, and it is just as relevant inside your home tonight as it was in a Roman tent 2,000 years ago. This nightly review is a quiet conversation with your own conscience. It is not about replaying the day's events like a movie. You are not writing a diary of what happened to you. You are conducting an audit of how you governed yourself. The Stoics outlined a simple, three-part structure for this, a framework that turns vague reflection into precise inner engineering. The first step is to examine your judgments and reactions. Look back on the moments that stirred something within you, that frustrating traffic jam, the offhand comment from a coworker that stung, the good news that made you euphoric. Do not judge the event itself. Instead, ask yourself, what story did I tell myself about this? What automatic assumption did I make? In that traffic jam, did I judge it as a personal injustice, a deliberate waste of my precious time? That judgment, not the cars themselves, is what generated your anger. This step is about spotting where you handed the keys to your inner citadel to an external circumstance. You are identifying the holes in your walls. The second step is to assess your actions against virtue. With that clearer view of your judgments, now look at your behavior. Given the story you were telling yourself, how did you act? Did you respond with patience or with irritation? Did you act with fairness, or did self-interest quietly steer the wheel? This is not about guilt. It is a dispassionate assessment, like a gardener noting which plants are thriving and which are being choked by weeds. You might see that you acted with great courage in a difficult conversation, or you might notice a moment where you could have been more generous. The goal is to connect your internal world to your external actions, to see the cause and effect. The final step is to plan for improvement. This is where you move from observation to strategy. Based on what you saw, what will you practice tomorrow? If you noticed a pattern of judging minor inconveniences as catastrophes, your plan might be, tomorrow, I will pause and label one small annoyance as simply a thing that happened, not a personal attack. If you saw a missed chance for kindness, your plan could be, I will offer one genuine compliment without expecting anything in return. This turns insight into a deliberate, manageable action. This three-part cycle, judgment, action, plan, transforms the daily review from passive recollection into active self-construction. You are not just thinking about your day. You are methodically strengthening the gatekeeper, brick by brick, night by night. That critical first step, catching the judgment, is where your sovereignty truly begins. The entire practice hinges on this moment of awareness. The Stoics had a powerful axiom for it, one that sounds simple but flips your entire experience of life upside down. They said, we are disturbed not by things but by our opinions about them. The event itself is neutral. It is just data. The suffering, the anxiety, the anger, all of that is generated by the story you instantly tell yourself about what that data means. This initial story is what they called the impression. It flashes through your mind in a fraction of a second, and if you do not catch it, it becomes your reality. Think of a critical email from your boss. The data is black text on a white screen. That is all it is, but your mind in an instant weaves a story. It might say, this is a personal attack. They think I am incompetent. My job is at risk. That story, that judgment, is what makes your heart race and your stomach drop. It is not the email. It is the opinion you formed about it. Another mind, a more stable one, could receive the exact same data and tell a different story. This is feedback to help me improve. My boss is under pressure, and this is not about me. I need to clarify a few points. That different story leads to a completely different emotional and physical state, and ultimately, a different action. Your power lies in spotting that first, automatic narrative. It is like learning to see the software running in the background of your mind, the code that dictates your emotional output. For the rest of the day, you are not at the mercy of events. You are developing the skill to question the automatic interpreter. When a friend cancels plans, does your mind whisper, they do not value our friendship, or does it say, something must have come up for them? When you face a setback at work, is the first impression, I am a failure, or is it, this is a difficult challenge to solve? Catching that judgment is not about suppressing the feeling that follows. It is about creating a tiny gap between the event and your belief in the story about the event. In that gap, you find your freedom. You reclaim the authority to decide what things mean. This is not positive thinking. It is accurate thinking. It is the deliberate, disciplined practice of aligning your internal narratives with what is actually true, rather than what your fears or insecurities might be screaming in the moment. That gap is the birthplace of your inner stability. That initial story you tell yourself is rarely a simple observation. It is a conclusion built on hidden foundations, beliefs so ingrained you mistake them for reality. The Stoics called these foundational beliefs dogmata, a word we can understand as our core assumptions. Your judgment that a critical email means you are failing is not plucked from thin air. It springs from a deeper, often unexamined dogma, perhaps one that whispers, "My worth is tied to perfect performance," or "Any criticism is a threat to my security." These are the silent architects of your emotional world. Dissecting the judgment means gently pulling it apart to see what it is built upon. Start by taking the surface reaction and asking, what would have to be true for this feeling to be absolutely justified? If that email made you feel like a failure, what unspoken rule was broken? The answer might be, I must never make a mistake, or authority figures must always approve of me. There is the dogma. Now, examine that belief as if you were a scientist looking at a curious specimen. Is it universally true? Do all people who make a single mistake become failures? Of course not. Is it helpful? Does believing your worth requires universal approval actually make you more secure, or does it set you up for constant anxiety? This process of interrogation creates a crucial separation. On one side, you have the observable event, the plain facts. My boss sent an email with critical feedback. On the other side, you have the layered story, the personal mythology you layered on top. My boss is disappointed, therefore I am inadequate, therefore my career is in jeopardy. The first is a neutral occurrence. The second is a painful, self-created narrative fueled by those hidden beliefs. By learning to spot the dogma, you are not just managing a single moment of stress. You are identifying the faulty code in your own operating system, the recurring themes that destabilize you across different areas of life. Perhaps you discover a deep-seated assumption that life should be fair, and every minor injustice then feels like a personal betrayal. Or you uncover a belief that you must be in control at all times, making any unexpected change feel like a crisis. Each dogma you uncover is a thread you can pull, loosening its grip on your perception. This is not about blaming yourself for having these beliefs. They are often learned protective mechanisms from long ago. The work is about updating them, bringing them into the light of your adult reasoning. When you separate the observable event from the story, you reclaim the power to author a new, more accurate, and ultimately more stable narrative. You move from being a character buffeted by the plot to becoming the editor of your own experience. With your judgments laid bare, the next question is what you built with them. Your thoughts are the blueprint, but your actions are the structure you actually live in. The Stoics called this second step the virtue audit, a shift from analyzing the weather inside your mind to inspecting the quality of the house you built that day. This is not about grading yourself on a pass-fail scale. It is a measured, compassionate review of how well your behavior aligned with your deepest principles. The Stoics organized these principles into 4 cardinal virtues, which are not lofty ideals but practical guides for human excellence. Think of them as 4 pillars that support a stable life. The first is wisdom. This is practical wisdom, the ability to see a situation clearly and navigate it skillfully. In your audit, you ask, where did I act with good judgment today? Did I gather enough information before forming a strong opinion? Did I let an old assumption cloud my view of a new problem? An example might be a work conflict. Wisdom is pausing to understand your colleague's perspective before deciding they are the enemy. The second pillar is courage. This is not just physical bravery, but the moral courage to do what is right despite fear or social pressure. Where did I stand up for a principle today, even if it was uncomfortable? Did I voice a respectful disagreement when it would have been easier to stay silent? Or conversely, did I avoid a necessary, difficult conversation out of fear of the reaction? Courage also means enduring hardship with grace without complaint. Did I meet an unexpected delay with patience, or did I let frustration dictate my mood? The third is justice. For the Stoics, this is our duty to other people and the community. It is about fairness, kindness, and contributing to the common good. In your review, you look at your interactions. Did I treat everyone with basic human dignity, regardless of their role or my personal feelings? Did I take more than my fair share, whether of credit, time, or resources? Did I act with generosity when an opportunity arose, or did I turn inward? A simple act of holding the door, genuinely listening to someone, or offering help without being asked, these are the bricks of a just life. The final pillar is temperance or self-discipline. This is the mastery of your impulses and desires. It is about proportion and moderation. Where did I exercise restraint today? Did I overindulge in something, whether it was food, screen time, or expressing anger? Did I pursue a pleasure at the cost of a more important goal? Temperance is the virtue that says no to a lesser good so you can say yes to a greater one. It is the discipline that keeps your life in balance. Your nightly audit walks through these 4 pillars. You look at a key moment from your day and hold it against each one. In that difficult meeting, did I act with wisdom and courage? In my quick interaction with the cashier, did I act with justice and kindness? At the end of a long day, did I choose temperance, or did I let exhaustion make my choices for me? You are not looking for perfection. You are looking for direction. You are asking a simple, profound question: where did I act with excellence today, and where did I fall short? The goal is to see the direct line between the judgments you identified and the actions that followed, and to gently, firmly guide that line toward a stronger character tomorrow. Guilt is a poor architect. It builds walls that trap you in the past. The Stoic nightly review concludes not with self-condemnation, but with a deliberate, forward-looking action. After you have examined your judgments and audited your actions, you stand at a crucial crossroads. You can either dwell on where you fell short, or you can close the loop with intention. This final step is what transforms reflection from a passive exercise in regret into an active practice of self-repair and growth. It has 2 parts, both aimed at the future, making amends and forming a resolve. Mentally making amends is the first gesture of repair. If your audit revealed a moment where you acted with less than your best character, where a flash of irritation made you speak harshly to a loved one, or where a selfish impulse led you to overlook someone's need, you do not simply note it and move on. You make an amends in your mind. This is not about grand, dramatic apologies, though those may follow in real life. It is an internal commitment to set things right. You visualize the person, and in the quiet of your reflection, you acknowledge the misstep. You might think tomorrow, I will offer a genuine apology for my tone, or I will make a point to listen more patiently when they speak. The power here is not in the fantasy, but in the shift it creates within you. It moves you from the role of a critic, judging your past self, to the role of a healer, responsible for mending the tear in your own character and your connection to others. It replaces the heavy, stagnant energy of guilt with the light, forward-moving energy of responsibility. The second, and arguably more important part, is forming a specific resolve for the coming day. This is where you take the insight from your audit and forge it into a single, actionable intention. A vague wish like "I will be better" dissolves by mid-morning. A Stoic resolve is precise, modest, and tied directly to what you discovered. If your audit showed a pattern of judging minor delays as personal affronts, your resolve might be, tomorrow, when I face my first unexpected wait, I will take one deep breath and label it simply a neutral event. If you saw a missed opportunity for generosity, your resolve could be, I will consciously perform one small, anonymous act of kindness. The key is to make it so simple and so concrete that success is almost guaranteed. This is not about overhauling your entire personality in a day. It is about laying one single brick in the wall of your inner citadel. By succeeding in this tiny, focused intention, you build evidence for your own capability. You prove to yourself that growth is not a distant ideal, but a series of manageable choices. This closing of the loop is what separates Stoic self-examination from mere rumination. Rumination is a closed circuit, a hamster wheel of thought that goes over the same distressing event again and again, generating more anxiety and helplessness. It asks, why did this happen to me and why did I react that way, without ever seeking an exit? The Stoic practice, by ending with amends and resolve, opens a door. It asks, given what happened and how I reacted, what is one small thing I can do to mend and to strengthen? It turns the energy of the past into fuel for the future. You are no longer a prisoner of what already occurred. You become the author of what happens next. This forward momentum is the true source of long-term stability. It assures you that no misstep is final, that every evening offers a chance to reconcile and to recommit. The practice does not promise you a day without error. It promises you a self that learns, adapts, and grows stronger with every review. Your stability is not found in a perfect record, but in the unwavering commitment to the process itself. That nightly resolve is more than a good intention. It is a direct instruction to your own brain. Every time you pause to question an automatic judgment, you are not just having a philosophical thought. You are physically reshaping the landscape of your mind. This is the profound secret behind the practice. The reason why a simple evening review, done consistently, does not just change your habits, it changes you. The mechanism is called neuroplasticity, your brain's lifelong ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections. Think of your most common reactive thoughts as deep, well-worn paths in a forest. The path of instant frustration when a plan changes, the path of defensiveness at the slightest criticism. These paths exist because you have walked them so many times. The neural connections for that reaction are strong and fast, like a highway for anxiety or anger. When an event triggers you, your mental traffic defaults to that familiar, high-speed route. Stoic self-examination is the deliberate act of stopping at the entrance to that old highway and choosing to blaze a new trail instead. You feel the surge of irritation, but instead of speeding down the frustration highway, you pause. You ask, is this within my control? What story am I telling myself? In that moment of pause, you are forcing your brain to engage a different network, the slower, more deliberate pathways of the prefrontal cortex, the seat of reason and judgment. Initially, this new trail is faint and difficult. It feels effortful and unnatural. But with each repetition, each nightly review where you dissect that judgment and plan a better response, you walk that new trail again. You strengthen those neural connections. The old reactive pathway, lacking traffic, begins to grow over. The new pathway of considered response becomes clearer, wider, and eventually the default route. This is not a metaphor. It is a biological process. You are building what we can call mental muscle memory for equanimity. Just as a pianist repeats scales until their fingers find the right keys without conscious thought, you are repeating the scales of self-awareness until calm discernment becomes your automatic response. The frustration still arises, the old path still exists, but now you have a stronger, more familiar alternative. You have trained your brain to take the exit toward stability. This rewiring is the ultimate source of long-term inner stability. It moves the practice from being something you do to something you have become. Your tranquil mind is no longer a state you have to consciously reach for amidst chaos. It becomes the architecture of your mind itself, a resilient network so well established that it holds you steady, even when you are not consciously thinking about it. The storms of life still come, but they now blow against a structure engineered for endurance. A stable mind does not feel less, it sees more clearly. This nightly practice does something remarkable to your inner world. It brings a blurry, overwhelming storm into sharp, manageable focus. Before the review, your emotional state might be a single, heavy label: I am stressed. That word is a suitcase packed with a chaotic jumble of feelings, fears, and reactions. It is impossible to unpack because you cannot see what is inside. Stoic self-examination teaches you to open the suitcase under the light of your attention. You stop at the vague feeling of stress and ask the pivotal question: what specifically am I feeling right now, and what judgment sparked it? The answer is rarely one thing. You begin to separate the threads. That tightness in your chest is not generic stress. It is a specific frustration because you judge the traffic jam as a theft of your time. That restless agitation is not just anxiety. It is a pinpoint envy triggered when you saw a colleague's success and told yourself a story about your own lack. That sinking dread is a focused worry about a future meeting, rooted in a judgment that you must perform perfectly to be safe. This is the development of emotional granularity. It is the difference between looking at a forest and seeing only a green blur, and learning to identify the oak, the maple, the pine. Each tree has different properties, needs, and ways of interacting with the environment. Frustration, envy, and anxiety are different emotional trees. They grow from different seeds, your specific judgments, and they require different responses. You cannot effectively manage a forest you cannot see. When your inner world is a blur of bad feeling, your only recourse is to try and numb it all, to distract yourself or shut down. But when you develop granularity, you gain precision. You realize you are not battling a monolithic force called stress. You are addressing a specific frustration about control, a specific envy about status, a specific anxiety about acceptance. This clarity is profoundly empowering. It moves you from a state of helpless victimhood, where things are just happening to you, to a state of engaged problem solving. You are no longer saying, I feel bad. You are saying, I am experiencing frustration because I attached my peace to an uncontrollable event. That shift is everything. The emotion does not disappear, but it is now held in the conscious space of your awareness, not the dark basement of your reactivity. You can look at it, understand its origin, and decide how to relate to it. This is the first non-negotiable step to genuine emotional mastery. You cannot change what you do not clearly see. By naming the specific emotion and tracing it back to its specific judgment, you turn the fog of suffering into a map you can actually read. And with that map in hand, you can finally begin to navigate. A map of your emotions reveals a critical fork in the road. The initial sting of a setback is often unavoidable. This is the first arrow, the plain fact of the event itself. You miss a crucial deadline, a trusted friend lets you down, a project you poured your heart into does not succeed. The pang of disappointment, the flash of hurt, the weight of the reality, these are natural human responses. They are the first arrow. Stoic self-examination, however, trains you to see the far more dangerous moment that follows. This is the moment you pick up a second arrow and plunge it into your own chest. The first arrow is the event. The second arrow is everything you add to it. It is the story of catastrophe you spin in the hours after the missed deadline, convincing yourself your career is ruined. It is the simmering resentment you nurse for weeks after your friend's mistake, replaying the betrayal in your mind until it poisons the relationship. It is the prolonged anger at yourself for the failed project, a relentless inner critic that insists you are a fraud. This second arrow is entirely optional. It is self-inflicted suffering layered on top of the initial, unavoidable pain. The ancient Stoics did not have this exact Buddhist phrase, but their entire philosophy is a manual for laying down that second arrow. They understood that while we cannot always dodge the first arrow of life's difficulties, we have absolute sovereignty over whether we shoot ourselves with the second, the third, and the 10th. Your nightly review is the training ground where you learn to feel the thud of the first arrow, and then consciously, deliberately, choose to not reach for your own quiver. You practice spotting the moment your mind wants to escalate a single event into a permanent tragedy. You felt the hurt that was real. Now, are you going to compound it with a narrative of permanent victimhood? You felt the anger that was a signal. Now, are you going to fuel it with fantasies of revenge or collapse into shame? This is the essence of reducing optional suffering. It is not about pretending the first arrow did not land. It is about refusing to grant it permission to multiply. In your review, when you dissect a judgment, you are often isolating that second arrow in flight. You trace the thread from the initial sting to the sprawling, suffocating web of worry you constructed around it. You see clearly where the natural pain ended and the self-created drama began. And with that clarity, night after night, you build the reflex of cessation. You learn to feel the urge to catastrophize, to resent, to ruminate, and instead of following it, you simply note, there is the second arrow. I will not throw it. This is how you build a life not free from pain, but free from the vast, unnecessary suffering we so expertly add to it. Your stability grows not because bad things stop happening, but because you stop being their most enthusiastic accomplice. This nightly conversation with yourself is more than a checklist. It is a training ground for a profound shift in identity. You are not just reviewing the person who lived the day, you are cultivating the person who can watch that review happen. This is the birth of what we might call the inner sage, or more simply, the observer self. It is the part of you that can step back from the rushing stream of your own thoughts and feelings and see them as objects floating by rather than being swept away in the current. This psychological distance is not a form of detachment from life, but the very foundation of your freedom within it. Think of your mind as a stage. For most of the day, you are the actor, fully immersed in the role, delivering lines of worry, passion, and reaction as if they were the only script. The observer is the one sitting in the back of the theater, watching the play unfold. This watcher notices when the actor flubs a line of anger or gets carried away in a melodrama of anxiety. The observer does not rush onto the stage to stop the play. It simply notes the performance. The ritual of the evening review is your daily appointment to strengthen this observer's seat. By systematically looking back at your judgments and actions, you are practicing the act of stepping out of the role. You are saying, that was the character's reaction in that scene. Now let me understand why he played it that way. This creates a crucial space between you and your automatic patterns. In the heat of the moment, when a surge of defensiveness arises, that space is what allows you to think, I am experiencing the feeling of defensiveness instead of simply becoming defensive. It is the difference between being in a storm and watching a storm from a sheltered porch. You still feel the wind and rain, but you are no longer at its mercy. This observer perspective is the bedrock of true emotional regulation. Regulation does not mean suppression. It means you have a governor, a wise inner mechanic who can assess the engine of your emotions without being consumed by the heat. When a wave of grief comes, the observer allows you to feel its full depth while also knowing, this is a wave and I am the ocean it moves through. The wave will pass, but the ocean remains. When a spark of jealousy ignites, the observer lets you see it as a flicker of flame in your mental fireplace, something to be acknowledged and understood, not a signal to throw more logs of resentment onto the fire. This ability is built through the quiet, consistent repetition of the review. Each night, you are rehearsing the move of stepping back. You are building the neural pathway that leads to the balcony seat. Over time, this observer stance begins to appear not just in your evening reflection, but in the middle of your day. You will find yourself in a tense conversation and a quiet, internal voice will note, your heart rate is increasing. you are starting to tell yourself a story about being disrespected. That note is the observer arriving, creating just enough distance for you to choose a different response. This is the silent, steady work that turns philosophy into lived experience and reactive suffering into chosen stability. That observer's seat is where the real alchemy happens. You are no longer just watching the play, you are rewriting the script in real time. This is the transformation from reaction to response, and the mechanism is a simple, powerful pause. Think of your mind as a river fed by the mountain streams of daily events, emotions, and thoughts. Without any intervention, it is a rushing torrent. An insult arrives and the current of anger sweeps you away instantly. A fear surfaces and you are pulled under by the rapids of anxiety. Your words and actions are just debris carried by the flow. The nightly practice of self-examination is the slow, deliberate work of building a dam across that river. Each evening, when you question a judgment or assess an action, you are placing one more stone in the structure. At first, the river still rushes over and around your small efforts, but with consistency, stone by stone, the dam rises. Its purpose is not to stop the river, to bottle up your feelings, but to create a reservoir. This reservoir is a space of calm water, a buffer zone between the upstream event and the downstream action. The stimulus hits the dam, and instead of an immediate flood, there is a moment of stillness. The water gathers. In that stillness, you find the space to choose. This is the critical pause that defines a mature character. It is the difference between snapping at your child because you are tired and feeling the irritation, pausing in the reservoir of your awareness and choosing to speak with patience. It is the difference between firing off a defensive email the second you feel criticized and letting the feeling settle, then crafting a measured, professional reply. The dam does not eliminate the water, the emotion. It gives you time to decide what to do with its energy. Will you open the floodgates and let it wreak havoc, or will you channel it through the turbines of your reason to generate purposeful action? Your nightly audit is the engineering report for this dam. Every time you trace a reactive outburst back to its source, you are studying the river's flow patterns. You are learning where the current is strongest, which triggers create the most powerful surges. This knowledge allows you to reinforce the dam at its most vulnerable points. You learn that criticism from authority figures is a major tributary for your anxiety, so you consciously add more stones there, rehearsing a calmer interpretation. You discover that unexpected changes in plan are a source of impulsive frustration, so you build the dam higher at that bend in the river. The practice does not happen in the moment of crisis. It happens in the quiet of the evening, which makes the moment of crisis manageable. When the next triggering event comes, you do not have to invent stability from scratch. You simply access the reservoir you have been filling night after night. The pause becomes natural, not because you are suppressing anything, but because you have created an internal infrastructure that supports choice. Your response is no longer the only possible outcome. It is the one you selected from a menu of better options. That is how a review of yesterday changes your behavior today. It builds the dam today so you have the reservoir tomorrow. The dam you build creates more than a pause, it creates a new vantage point. From this higher ground, the landscape of your daily irritations begins to look remarkably different. The practice of nightly self-examination does something unexpected over time. It immunizes you against the tyranny of trivialities. When you consistently review what genuinely disturbed your peace, a pattern emerges that is both humbling and liberating. You start to see that a staggering amount of your emotional energy was being spent on things that, in the clear light of reflection, simply did not matter. That heated online argument, the simmering resentment over a perceived slight in a meeting, the anxiety spiraling from a single critical comment, these events shrink when held against the measuring stick of your core virtues and the vastness of a life well lived. This is the perspective shift, the natural recalibration of your attention. You are not forcing yourself to not care, you are training yourself to see clearly what is actually worth caring about. Consider the difference between looking at an object through a magnifying glass and seeing it with your naked eye. The magnifying glass is your unchecked, reactive mind. It takes a minor inconvenience, a rude driver, a delayed package, and blows it up to fill your entire field of vision. It appears huge, urgent, and worthy of your full outrage. The nightly review is the act of putting the magnifying glass down. You step back. Suddenly, that same event is just one small detail in the sprawling mural of your day, your week, your life. It has not changed, but your relationship to it has transformed completely. This is the cosmic view the Stoics spoke of, not as an abstract concept, but as a practical tool for stability. Marcus Aurelius would remind himself to view human affairs from the perspective of a mountaintop. From that height, the bustling cities, the conflicts, the triumphs and losses, all appear as small, intricate movements in a grander pattern. Your own troubles, when you learn to occasionally adopt this view, lose their capacity to overwhelm. This recalibration happens through a simple, repeated question that arises from your audit. When examining a moment of disturbance, you eventually ask, in the grand scheme of my character and my purpose, does this merit the energy I gave it? Does this align with the virtue of wisdom, or was it a waste of mental effort? Does this touch upon justice or courage, or is it merely a scratch on the ego? You might find that the email that ruined your afternoon was, in truth, a neutral piece of information that you personally dramatized into a crisis. The opinion of a stranger that sparked indignation was just a fleeting sound in the wind, with no real power over your worth or your path. By repeatedly identifying these moments as the second arrow, as optional suffering you chose to add, you build a resistance to them. The next time a similar trigger arises, there is a memory in your nervous system, a whisper from last night's review that says, this feels familiar, this is the kind of thing that shrinks in the light of reflection. And in that moment, you have a choice you did not have before. You can choose to not magnify it. This does not make you passive or indifferent to the world. It makes you selective and powerful with your focus. Your emotional energy becomes a precious resource like water in a desert. You stop pouring it onto the hot, barren sand of gossip, manufactured outrage, and personal pettiness. You conserve it for the true oases, for the relationships that need nurturing, for the work that demands your full creativity, for the genuine injustices that call for your courage and action. The trivialities lose their power not because you suppress your reaction, but because you have seen with your own eyes in your own review their true diminutive size. They are the background noise, and your practice is the tuning of your inner instrument to hear only the signal, the notes that contribute to the music of a virtuous life. This is how inner stability becomes sustainable. It is not a constant battle against every wind, but the learned skill of knowing which winds are worth setting your sails against. Virtue begins as a conscious choice and ends as an unconscious character. This is the ancient insight that bridges philosophy and daily life. When you perform your nightly virtue audit, you are not merely keeping score of good and bad deeds. You are engaging in the most profound form of training imaginable, the deliberate practice of becoming who you wish to be. The philosopher Aristotle, whose ideas deeply influenced later Stoic thought, gave us a powerful framework for this. He observed that we do not act rightly because we possess virtue. Rather, we possess virtue because we have habitually acted rightly. Excellence, he taught, is not an act but a habit. Your evening review is the dedicated rehearsal space where that habit is forged. Think of it like learning to play a musical instrument. Reading sheet music about kindness is the abstract principle. The virtue audit is the moment you sit down at the piano of your own behavior and practice the scales. You replay the day's difficult conversation, noting where your tone could have been more patient. You revisit a moment of temptation, acknowledging where you chose restraint. Each time you do this, you are not just remembering, you are rehearsing. You are strengthening the neural pathways associated with fairness, courage, and wisdom, making those pathways the default routes for your future actions. This transforms virtue from a lofty ideal you admire into a reliable reflex you embody. A person who has practiced patience through daily reflection does not need to dig deep for it in a crisis. It is simply how they now operate. Their moral compass does not spin wildly looking for true north. It points steadily because it has been calibrated night after night through honest examination. The goal is to make the right action feel as natural and automatic as breathing. You are building a character so consistent that when life presents its next challenge, your response is not a frantic calculation, but the clear, stable output of a well-trained system. Your nightly review exposes a hidden engine driving much of your instability, the twin forces of desire and aversion. This is the bedrock of Stoic psychology, the understanding that our suffering is not caused by the world itself, but by our intense wanting of some things and our fierce rejection of others. We desire praise, comfort, security, and success. We are averse to criticism, discomfort, uncertainty, and failure. These are not inherently wrong, but when left unexamined, they become the puppet strings controlling our peace. The practice of self-examination gently pulls on these strings, asking a vital question: where today did my happiness become contingent on something outside of my control? You might notice a subtle craving for external validation, a quiet disappointment when your hard work went unnoticed. You could spot an aversion to a necessary but uncomfortable conversation, one you postponed to avoid a moment of tension. Perhaps you see a desire for a specific outcome, a promotion or a particular result that you had mentally attached to your sense of worth. In the clear light of your review, these attachments are laid bare. You are not judging the desire for a good life, but you are seeing clearly where you mistakenly tied your inner stability to obtaining it. This is the practice of loosening the grip. By simply observing these cravings and aversions without immediately acting on them or condemning yourself for having them, you create space. You begin to separate the pure energy of your effort from the frantic need for a particular reward. The Stoic ideal is not to abandon goals or cease striving. It is to pursue your aims with excellence while holding the outcome lightly. Imagine an archer. Her virtue lies in everything within her control, selecting the best bow, practicing her form daily, focusing her mind, and releasing the arrow with skill and precision. The moment the arrow leaves the string, her control ends. The wind may gust, the target may move, a bird could fly through the path. If she has attached her entire sense of self to the arrow striking the bullseye, she sets herself up for anguish. Her stability is shattered by a gust of wind. The Stoic archer does her part with full dedication, but she understands that the final result is not hers to command. Her peace resides in the quality of her release, not in the fickle judgment of the target. Your nightly review trains you to be that archer in your own life. You assess your aim, your form, your focus, the virtues you applied in your efforts. Did I work with diligence? Did I act with integrity? Did I collaborate with fairness? These are your bullseye. The external outcome, whether you received the praise, closed the deal, or avoided the discomfort, becomes data, not a verdict on your soul. This detachment from specific outcomes is the ultimate liberation. It allows you to engage fully in the world without being broken by it. You can want something deeply, work for it tirelessly, and still remain inwardly steady whether it arrives or not. Your desire is channeled into virtuous action, not into anxious clinging. Your aversion is transformed into courageous engagement with difficulty, not into avoidance and fear. Night after night, this review quietly dismantles the architecture of conditional happiness. You stop saying, "I will be okay only if," and you start building a self that is okay because you know you did your part with character. The goal does not disappear, but its power to destabilize you does. The most powerful material for your nightly review is not your success, but your setback. A life committed to inner stability does not avoid difficulty, it learns to metabolize it. This is where the practice shifts from maintenance to true transformation, turning every obstacle into the precise fuel for your growth. When hardship arrives, the untrained mind sees only a wall, a dead end, a reason to despair. The mind trained in Stoic self-examination sees something entirely different, a doorway labeled classroom. Your review becomes the process of walking through that door. The pivotal question is no longer, why did this happen to me, but what can this teach me about my judgments? This single reframe is alchemical. It moves you from the role of a victim, passively enduring a blow, to the role of a student, actively mining the experience for wisdom. Consider a professional disappointment, a project that fell through despite your best efforts. The raw feeling is one of loss. In your evening review, you sit with that feeling and begin the dissection. What was my initial judgment when I received the news? Perhaps it was, my hard work is meaningless, or I am not good enough for this field. There is the first arrow, the unavoidable sting of the outcome. Now trace the second arrows. Did I then spiral into a story about my entire career being doomed? Did I withdraw from my team out of shame? By mapping this internal cascade, you accomplish something profound. You separate the event from the mythology you built around it. The event itself is neutral data, a project ended. The suffering was in the catastrophic narrative you authored. This analysis does not dismiss the pain, it clarifies its source. You see that your stability was shaken not by the event alone, but by the fragile judgment that your worth was tied to that single outcome. With that clarity, you can now ask the constructive questions. What does this reveal about where I mistakenly placed my security? How can I pursue excellence without making my self-esteem hostage to every result? This is how resilience is forged, not by avoiding the fire, but by learning to work with its heat. Each reviewed setback adds a new layer of tempering to your character, making you less brittle and more adaptable. The Stoics aimed for a quality we might now call antifragility, the trait of systems that gain from disorder. A fragile wine glass shatters under stress. A resilient plastic cup withstands it. An antifragile muscle, however, actually grows stronger when subjected to the stress of exercise. Your nightly review of hardships is the regimen that trains your inner world to be antifragile. By systematically examining how you judged and reacted to a difficulty, you are forcing your psychological muscles to adapt. You are learning to extract strength from the very things that could have broken you. The setback becomes a diagnostic tool, highlighting the exact areas where your judgments are still fragile, where your attachments are too tight, where your courage needs strengthening. This turns the chronology of your life into a curriculum. Every challenge, large and small, is a lesson assigned specifically to you, not by a cruel universe, but by the inherent need of your own character to develop. Your job is not to complain about the homework, but to do the reading, to show up for the review, and to integrate the learning. When you make this your practice, you begin to meet future obstacles with a different energy. There is still effort, there is still feeling, but underneath it is a thread of curiosity. What will this reveal? What part of me is being called to grow now? This is the unshakable core, the knowledge that no event, however painful, is wasted. It is all raw material for the person you are building, one examined evening at a time. Your inner stability is not a private fortress, but the foundation for every bridge you build to another person. The nightly review holds a special power when you turn its light toward your relationships, applying the specific lens of the Stoic virtue of justice. This is not justice as a courtroom drama, but as a daily, practical commitment to fairness, kindness, and the fundamental dignity of every person you encounter. It asks you to examine your interactions with a simple, piercing question. Did I treat this person as a fellow human being or as a means to an end? This transforms your social world from a source of unpredictable drama into a field for conscious cultivation. Begin by selecting 1 or 2 key interactions from your day. It could be a conversation with your partner, a negotiation with a coworker, or even a brief exchange with a stranger. Now replay the scene not to judge their behavior, but to audit your own through 3 filters of justice. First, did I act with fairness? This goes beyond obvious ethics. It asks, did I give them the benefit of the doubt, or did I jump to a conclusion based on my mood? In a disagreement, did I truly consider their perspective as valid as my own, or was I only listening to prepare my rebuttal? Fairness in relationships means acknowledging the other person's reality as real to them, even when it conflicts with yours. Second, did I listen fully? This is an act of profound justice. Most conflict is not born from malice, but from the quiet violence of not being heard. In your review, ask yourself when they spoke, was my attention fully present, or was my mind already crafting my response? Did I seek to understand, or merely to be understood? True listening is a gift of your most finite resource, your attention, and it signals that the other person matters. Third, and perhaps most telling, was I kind? Kindness here is not sentimentality, it is actionable goodwill. It is the choice to respond with patience instead of irritation when tired. It is offering help without being asked, or withholding a cutting remark you had every social right to make. In your audit, look for the small omissions, the moments where kindness was an available option you bypassed because you were rushed, stressed, or self-absorbed. This justice review does something remarkable to your social circuitry. By consistently examining your interactions for fairness, listening, and kindness, you are training your brain to prioritize connection over being right. You start to catch yourself in the moment, noticing when you are about to interrupt or when your tone is becoming dismissive. This cultivated empathy is not about agreeing with everyone. It is about understanding them, which is the only reliable way to reduce unnecessary conflict. When you approach a disagreement from this practiced stance, you are no longer 2 adversaries trying to win. You are 2 collaborators trying to solve a shared problem, the problem of misunderstanding. The stability this builds in your relationships is deep and lasting. People feel safe around you because they sense the consistency of your character. They know you will strive to be fair, that you will genuinely listen, and that you will choose kindness whenever possible. This does not make you a pushover, it makes you a pillar. Virtuous relationships are not those free from disagreement, but those where every challenge is navigated on the solid ground of mutual respect. Your nightly justice review ensures you are contributing your half of that foundation, brick by examined brick, conversation by conscious conversation. The evening review closes the day with wisdom, but the morning offers a chance to begin it with intention. This is the complementary practice the Stoics called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of difficulties, and it transforms your nightly insights into proactive armor. While the review looks back to understand your reactions, the preview looks forward to prepare your mind. It is not about pessimism or dwelling on what could go wrong, but about a clear-eyed, courageous rehearsal of reality. You are not inviting trouble, you are immunizing yourself against surprise, the great destabilizer of the inner peace you worked so hard to build the night before. Think of it as a mental fire drill. You do not conduct a fire drill because you want the building to burn. You do it so that if the alarm ever sounds, your response is not panic, but a calm, practiced procedure. The morning preview is your daily mental fire drill. You sit for a few quiet moments before the day begins and you deliberately consider what challenges might today reasonably present. Not fantasies of catastrophe, but the realistic friction of an ordinary life. You might anticipate a difficult conversation you have been postponing, a tedious task that requires discipline, or the potential for frustration in your commute. You do not stop at the mere thought of these things. You go further, you visualize them happening, and more importantly, you visualize yourself meeting them with your practiced virtues. You see the difficult conversation, and in your mind's eye, you respond with patience and clarity, not defensiveness. You see the tedious task, and you envision approaching it with focused diligence. You see the traffic jam, and you rehearse accepting it as a neutral event, using the time to listen to something enriching or simply to breathe. This is the key. You are not just anticipating the event, you are pre-selecting your response. You are wiring your brain for stability before the trigger is ever pulled. By pairing the evening review with this morning preview, you create a continuous, reinforcing loop of mindful living. The review teaches you what destabilized you yesterday, and the preview allows you to apply that lesson to what might challenge you today. Last night, you saw how a craving for control made you angry at a delay. This morning, you preview a potential delay and rehearse releasing that craving, meeting the moment with acceptance. You are no longer living reactively, from one unexpected blow to the next. You are living intentionally within a protective cycle of learning and application. Your stability is no longer something you hope to recover after it is lost. It becomes something you actively install at the start of each day. The morning sun finds your inner citadel not asleep and undefended, but alert, prepared, and already standing firm. This nightly conversation will not always feel easy. Some evenings you will feel too exhausted to even begin. The thought of revisiting a difficult day can seem like adding another chore to an already full list. Your mind might resist, offering a dozen good reasons to skip it just this once. This is not a sign you are doing it wrong, it is a sign you are doing it. The Stoics themselves were not immune to this friction. They understood that the path to virtue required effort, and effort is by definition something we must overcome inertia to perform. On those nights, the solution is not to abandon the practice but to simplify it radically. Do not feel you must review the entire day. Instead, focus on just one single event, even a small one. Perhaps it was the moment you snapped at a family member, or the wave of envy you felt scrolling online. Pick that one thread and follow it through the 3 steps. What was the judgment? How did I act? What is one tiny step for tomorrow? This takes only a few minutes, but it maintains the essential muscle memory of the practice. It keeps the dam under construction, even if you only add one small stone. Consistency over time matters infinitely more than perfect, lengthy reviews every single night. Another obstacle is facing painful realizations. The review can shine a light on parts of ourselves we would rather keep in shadow. We might see a pattern of pettiness, a recurring cowardice, or a deep-seated resentment we have been nurturing. This can bring up shame, and shame tempts us to close the notebook and walk away. Here, the Stoic virtue of justice must be turned inward. Apply the same fairness you would offer a friend who came to you with a difficult confession. You would likely listen with compassion, acknowledge the mistake, and encourage them to learn and move forward. Offer that same compassion to yourself. The goal of the review is not self-flagellation, it is self-repair. Seeing the flaw clearly is the first and most courageous step toward mending it. The pain of the realization is the signal that something important has been discovered, not a punishment for discovering it. Treat it as valuable diagnostic information, the ache that tells you where the bone is broken so you can set it properly. Finally, the practice can sometimes feel mechanical, like checking a box rather than engaging in a meaningful dialogue. When the words become rote, the power drains away. This is when you reconnect with the ultimate purpose, the long-term goal of freedom. You are not performing a ritual for its own sake. You are chiseling away the chains of automatic reaction, link by link. Remind yourself what you are building toward, a mind that cannot be hijacked by trivialities, a heart that remains steady in loss, a will that chooses its responses rather than being chosen by its impulses. On the mechanical nights, ask yourself one simple question before you begin. What single freedom do I want more of tomorrow? Is it freedom from the need for approval, freedom from the grip of anger, freedom from the anxiety of uncertainty? Let that desired freedom guide your review. Look for the one judgment or action that most directly blocked that freedom today, and plan one small act to reclaim it tomorrow. This re-infuses the practice with its original, vital meaning. It becomes not a task but a liberation in progress. The obstacles are not failures, they are the curriculum. Each night you choose to practice despite tiredness, you strengthen discipline. Each time you face a painful truth with compassion, you deepen courage. Each moment you reconnect with your purpose, you renew your wisdom. The difficulty is the whetstone that sharpens the very tool you are using to build your stability. This inner work demands a gentle hand. There is a hidden danger in the practice of self-examination, a subtle trap that can turn a tool for liberation into an instrument of self-torment. It is the shadow of Stoic perfectionism, the tendency to wield the nightly review not as a compassionate audit, but as a brutal report card where every shortcoming feels like a failing grade. If you find yourself ending your review feeling smaller, more discouraged, or burdened by shame, you have missed the spirit of the practice entirely. The Stoics were not building superhuman paragons of flawless virtue. They were cultivating human beings capable of steady progress. The goal was never a spotless record of perfect actions. The goal was a resilient character that learns, adapts, and grows stronger from its own stumbles. When Marcus Aurelius wrote his private thoughts, he was not cataloguing his triumphs. He was confronting his own anger, his weariness, his temptations toward vanity. He was speaking to himself not as a faultless emperor, but as a struggling student of his own philosophy. His notes are filled with gentle reminders, not scathing condemnations. This is the crucial distinction. The review is meant to be a loving correction, not a punishment. Its intent is surgical precision, not blunt force trauma. You are a gardener tending to the complex ecosystem of your soul, not a judge delivering a life sentence. The moment the practice fuels a narrative of "I am not good enough," you have swapped the second arrow from the world and are now plunging it into yourself. You have taken the very tool designed to reduce optional suffering and are using it to create more. This perfectionism misunderstands the core Stoic virtue of wisdom, which includes the wisdom to know that growth is a slow, non-linear process. Seneca, in his letters to his friend Lucilius, embodies this perfectly. He does not write as a master lecturing a novice from a pedestal of perfection. He writes as a fellow traveler, sharing his own ongoing struggles and insights. He corrects Lucilius's thinking with firmness, but always with the underlying tone of friendship and a shared desire for improvement. The letters are prompts for reflection, not indictments. He might point out a flaw in reasoning, but he does so to illuminate a path forward, not to highlight a personal failing. This is the spirit you must bring to your own inner dialogue. When you review a moment where you acted with less than courage, the question is not, "Why am I such a coward?" That is self-flagellation. The Stoic question is, what fear was speaking in that moment, and how can I listen to my courage a little more clearly tomorrow? One looks backward with blame, the other looks forward with strategy. Your nightly review is a meeting with your wisest, most supportive inner advisor. This advisor sees your mistakes clearly, but views them as data points on a map, not as stains on your character. Their sole interest is in plotting the next, best, most achievable step on your journey. They know that berating you for taking a wrong turn is useless. What matters is calmly reorienting the compass and choosing the next footstep. So tonight, if you sit down and feel the old critic rising, pause. Remember the purpose. You are not here to prove your worth. Your worth as a human being striving for better is the starting assumption, not the contingent reward. You are here to understand your patterns so you can navigate them with more skill and less suffering. Measure your progress in millimeters, not miles. Did you pause for 1 second longer before reacting today than you did yesterday? That is a victory. Did you recognize the onset of a familiar resentment and choose to question its story? That is profound growth. The stability you are building is not a fortress of perfect stone without crack or flaw. It is the stability of a deeply rooted tree. The tree bends in the storm, it loses leaves, its bark bears the scars of seasons and passing creatures, but its roots, grown deep and wide through consistent, patient growth, hold it fast. Your practice is the growth of those roots. Each honest, compassionate review, especially on the days you feel you have failed, sends another tendril into the soil of your character. Perfection is a brittle, lonely ideal. Progress, however imperfect, is the living, breathing reality of a life courageously examined. That rooted, patient growth requires a practical home. The Stoics of antiquity used parchment and ink, but the core of the practice is not bound to any specific material. It is a movement of the mind, a turning of attention inward, and that can be done with the tools you already have at hand. The medium matters far less than the consistency of the message you are sending to yourself. Let us look at 3 common formats, each with its own texture and trade-offs, to find what might best support your own rhythm. The traditional analog method is a dedicated notebook. This could be a simple journal, a leather-bound book, or even a stack of index cards kept by your bedside. The physical act of writing by hand is its own form of meditation. The slowing down, the connection between thought and motion, can help deepen the reflection. There is a tangible record of your progress, a shelf of volumes that becomes a quiet testament to your commitment over years. The potential drawback is the same as its strength. It requires a deliberate act. You must have the notebook, a pen, and a moment to sit. For some, this ritual is essential. For others, on exhausting days, it can feel like one more hurdle. Then there is the digital notepad, a notes app on your phone or tablet. This method lives in the device that is almost always with you, making it incredibly accessible. You can jot down a reflection during your commute, or tap out a few lines before sleep without turning on a light. The search function allows you to look back and identify patterns, like tracking how often a specific trigger arises over months. The con is the proximity to distraction. Opening your phone to write might invite the pull of notifications, emails, or social media, potentially fragmenting the very focus you are trying to cultivate. If you choose this path, discipline is key, perhaps by using an app in full screen mode or turning on Do Not Disturb for those few minutes. A third, profoundly effective method is the voice memo. This is speaking your review aloud, as if explaining your day to a wise and compassionate friend. This format can feel the most natural and conversational, bypassing the sometimes critical filter that writing can engage. It captures the nuance in your tone, the pauses, the sighs, which can be revealing in themselves. Listening back to older memos can be a powerful way to hear your own growth or to spot recurring defensive patterns in your speech. The challenge here is privacy and organization, ensuring you have a quiet space and a reliable system for storing these audio files. The critical insight is that no single method is superior. The best system is the one you will use consistently, night after night. The goal is not to create a literary masterpiece or a perfect audio log. The goal is to externalize the process, to get the swirling thoughts out of your head and into a form where you can observe them with clarity. Whether your words meet paper, pixels, or air, you are performing the same essential act. You are building a space between experience and understanding. You are constructing your own classroom from the raw materials of your day, and the only required tool is your willing attention. The transformation arrives not as a sudden epiphany, but as a quiet realization one ordinary morning. You notice a delay that would have once sparked a chain reaction of frustration, and instead there is simply a breath, a recalibration of plans, and a steady move forward. The space between event and reaction, once so narrow and frantic, now feels like a wide, calm courtyard within your own mind. This is the long-term trajectory of the practice, the moment when the nightly review stops being something you do and becomes the invisible architecture of who you are. You are no longer practicing Stoicism, you are living from a Stoic character. The shift is subtle but total, like a dancer whose training has dissolved into graceful, unconscious movement. The principles of examining judgments and aligning with virtue are no longer a separate set of rules you consult. They are the native language of your inner dialogue. When a challenge arises, your first impulse is not to panic or blame, but to assess with a calm clarity, what is within my control here, and what virtue does this moment ask of me? The practice has rewired your default settings. Your stability is no longer a goal on the horizon. It is the ground you are standing on. This evolution from practice to identity changes your relationship to the review itself. It becomes less of a formal nightly task and more the natural rhythm of a well-ordered mind, a gentle turning inward as natural as brushing your teeth before bed. Some nights it is a few moments of quiet consideration before sleep, a simple mental scan of the day's key moments. Other times, when life is more turbulent, you might return to the structured three-step audit, not out of obligation, but because you know it is the most effective tool you possess to restore your own equilibrium. The practice becomes a trusted companion, not a stern teacher. You engage with it not because you fear falling short, but because you cherish the clarity and freedom it consistently returns to you. You miss it when you skip it, not out of guilt, but because you feel the subtle return of mental clutter, the faint reversion to reactive patterns. The review is how you tidy your inner world, creating space for peace and purposeful action. Over months and years, this cultivated stability compounds. The resilience you have built is not a rigid shield, but a profound flexibility. You can withstand greater pressures not because you have become harder, but because you have become more adaptable, like a bamboo grove that bends in a hurricane without breaking. Life's inevitable hardships, from personal losses to professional setbacks, are met with a different quality of presence. There is still grief, there is still pain. The first arrow always lands. But the second arrow, the volley of self-created suffering through catastrophic storytelling and relentless resistance, largely ceases. You have trained yourself to feel the ache without constructing a monument of despair around it. You understand, in your bones, the difference between pain and optional suffering. This discernment is the ultimate fruit of the long-term practice. Your energy is no longer consumed by battling phantom narratives, so it becomes available for what truly matters, for deep connection, for creative work, for compassionate action in a world that needs it. Your inner citadel is not a place you retreat from life, but the fortified base from which you engage with life more fully, courageously, and kindly than you ever thought possible. That stable ground you stand on was not built by listening alone. There is a vast and crucial difference between knowing the path and walking it, a chasm that separates the passive consumer of wisdom from the active architect of their own mind. Our modern world offers endless access to the former. You can spend hours listening to profound podcasts on Stoicism, fill your shelves with books on mindfulness, and curate a social media feed overflowing with inspirational quotes. This consumption feels productive. It feels like growth. You are gathering knowledge, and knowledge is power, right? But here is the subtle trap. This is largely passive work. You are letting someone else's insights wash over you, hoping some fraction will stick. It is mental fast food, convenient and temporarily satisfying, but it does not build the deep, resilient tissue of lasting change. It is like watching documentaries about fitness and nutrition, studying exercise physiology, and admiring athletes, all while never actually lifting a weight or going for a run. Your understanding of the theory may become sophisticated, but your muscles remain weak. Your mind is no different. The quotes you read are someone else's hard-won conclusions from their own labor of introspection. If you do not do that labor yourself, the words remain external decoration, not internal reinforcement. When a true crisis hits, the beautifully phrased quote you memorized may flutter away like a leaf in a gale, because it was never rooted in the soil of your own examined experience. Passive consumption creates a library in your head. Active self-examination builds a workshop. In the library, you collect ideas. In the workshop, you take the raw, rough material of your own judgments and behaviors, and you shape them. You sand down the jagged edges of reactive anger. You forge new tools of patience from the heat of daily friction. You assemble the framework of your character, piece by conscious piece. This is active, often uncomfortable work. It requires you to turn the light of your attention onto parts of yourself you might prefer to ignore, the pettiness, the envy, the fear. Reading about courage is a passive act, sitting with your own avoidance of a difficult conversation and planning to face it, that is active training. Listening to a talk on temperance is passive, reviewing your day to see where you overindulged in distraction or complaint and resolving to do better, that is active discipline. The passive approach outsources the labor of transformation. It hopes that exposure to enough good ideas will somehow, by osmosis, rewire your nervous system. The active approach accepts that you, and only you, can do that rewiring. The podcasts and books are invaluable maps, but they cannot walk the terrain for you. The true stability, the kind that holds when everything else gives way, is forged in the quiet, unglamorous workshop of your own nightly review. It is built not from the accumulation of knowledge, but from the repeated application of effort to your own soul. One gives you something to think about, the other changes how you think. This daily alignment with reality is the deepest form of stability. Your nightly review does more than manage your reactions. It slowly, steadily trains your perception to see the world as it truly is, not as you wish it to be. This is the Stoic discipline of assent, the practice of consciously agreeing only with accurate impressions of reality. Each evening, when you dissect a judgment and ask, "Is that story true?" you are practicing this discipline. You are learning to withhold your mental agreement from the catastrophic fantasies and the self-pitying narratives, and instead grant your assent only to the plain, observable facts. The email contained critical feedback, that is a fact. My story that this means I am a failure, that is an optional fiction. By consistently choosing fact over fiction in your review, you are recalibrating your entire mind to default to truth. This creates a stability that cannot be shaken by misleading appearances, because you have built the habit of looking past them to the sober reality beneath. You are anchoring your ship to the seabed, not to the shifting waves on the surface. This work with your judgments is intimately tied to the discipline of desire. Your desires and aversions are ultimately judgments about what is good or bad for you. When you crave a specific outcome, you have judged it as a necessary good. When you flee from a difficulty, you have judged it as an intolerable evil. The nightly review exposes these hidden verdicts. You see that your anxiety was rooted in a desire for a guarantee that life cannot provide. Your frustration sprang from an aversion to an event you could not control. By examining these moments, you are not trying to eliminate desire itself, but to purify it. You are learning to desire only what is truly good, which for the Stoics is the excellence of your own character, and to be averse only to what is truly bad, which is the corruption of that character. Everything else, the promotions, the losses, the praise, the criticism, becomes preferred or dispreferred, but never essential to your peace. This realignment is what connects you to the Stoic concept of the logos, the rational principle ordering the universe. To live in accordance with nature or the logos means to accept the world as a coherent, interconnected whole, and to see your own reason as a fragment of that greater intelligence. Your daily review is the practical ritual that fosters this alignment. When you accept a difficult fact without adding a layer of rebellious story, you are assenting to reality as it is, which is to assent to the logos. When you channel a raw desire into the focused desire to act virtuously, you are aligning your personal drive with the universal principle of growth and order. This perspective is the cosmic view. It is the understanding that your small story is part of a vast, unfolding narrative. From this vantage point, personal setbacks are not meaningless punishments, but necessary turns in a larger plot you cannot fully see. This does not make the pain disappear, but it frames it within a context so immense that it loses its power to define your entire existence. Your stability is no longer just personal grit. It is a participation in the fundamental order of things. You find a profound peace not by getting everything you want, but by wanting to understand and accept everything you get. The traffic jam is not an enemy. It is a manifestation of a complex system of movement. The professional rejection is not a verdict on your soul. It is a redirection within a vast network of opportunity and need. This is the ultimate anchor. Your tranquility is moored not in the shallow soil of your changing circumstances, but in the bedrock of reality itself. You stop arguing with what is, and instead begin a lifelong conversation with what can be built upon it. The inner citadel is not a gift, it is a construction project. Every evening you sit with your own thoughts, questioning a judgment or assessing an action. You are placing another stone in its walls. This is not mystical work. It is the deliberate, iterative labor of self-architecture, where the blueprint is your chosen virtues and the raw materials are the unedited moments of your day. You are literally building the structure of your character, one examined experience at a time. That long-term stability you seek is not a sudden arrival. It is the compound interest earned on these daily, often quiet, investments in self-awareness. Each night you refuse the second arrow, you earn a fraction more peace. Every time you trace a reaction back to its source, you strengthen your mental circuitry for clarity. Every act of courage or kindness you note and resolve to repeat adds another layer of resilience to your foundation. These small returns, reinvested night after night, year after year, grow into the unshakable asset of a tranquil mind. The Stoics did not promise a life without storms. They promised a self that could remain dry inside while the rain fell. That promise is kept not in a book, but in the persistent, humble practice of turning your attention inward when the world pulls it outward. So here is the only step that matters now. Tonight, before you sleep, take 5 minutes. Do not overcomplicate it. Simply ask yourself one version of the ancient questions. What story did I tell myself today that caused me unnecessary pain? Where did I act well, and where could I have been better? What is one small thing I will try differently tomorrow? Then close the book or turn off the light and rest. You have just laid your first stone. The most reliable path to the life they promised begins not with more knowledge, but with this single, repeatable act. Your citadel awaits its architect.